So the 25th season of Jaguars football once again brings us some riveting football action as the Jaguars faced the Philadelphia Eagles at home and lost by a score of 24-10. Yet another week, the Jaguars didn't have anybody starting. The only starter out there was Jared Wilson. So if you're looking for guys like Nick Foles, you could find him on the Philadelphia Eagles social media sites. If you're looking for Leonard Fournette, you can find him doing that game on the sidelines that I still quite can't understand. And if you're looking for Cam Robinson, he's out there slipping and sliding on his ACL on the sidelines. So really there wasn't a whole lot with this game, but there was some players that we can evaluate and certain situations that we can talk about. And we're going to do it right now. So I'll start off by saying this. The Jaguars' offensive line this play was bad. It was really, really bad. And really, when you evaluate certain position groups, it seems like the biggest drop-off in skill level is, number one, probably the quarterback when you go from the starting quarterback to the backup quarterback. And the number two position group is probably the offensive line. Now, when you look by the numbers, it's not really hard to understand why. I mean, when week one of the NFL season comes out, there's 32 different teams. There's 5 starting offensive linemen on every team. So you got to think, there's 180 starting offensive linemen out there. So naturally, when you're down the depth chart, when you're at like the 200th best offensive lineman, the skill is commonly going to drop off. And that was with this game. I mean, the offensive line play was just terrible. I mean, we had this right tackle, Leonard Wester, that was just horrible, the number 61. Cedric Ogbuehi, I thought, had a rough game. But one thing that troubles me a little bit about this offensive line is a lot of times it seems like they're not in the right place. So I don't know if it's, really just a lack of skill or if it's maybe they're not being coached right, because a lot of times it just didn't seem like they were pulling into the right spots. It didn't seem like they had the right assignments. And I'll be really interested to see next week once we actually have some of our starting offensive linemen playing. I would hope we have all of our starting offensive line out there with guys like Brandon Linder, Andrew Norwell. I'm hoping Juwan Taylor plays, but a lot of those guys have been dealing with injuries, so I hope we see a bunch of them. But that made the QB play, I feel bad for Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew actually had a really good game. He was 19 for 29 with 60, which is a 65% completion percentage, and he had 202 yards. And he actually looked really good this game. I mean, even though he was getting pressured a lot, he was extremely poised in the pocket. He stood up in there, made throws. He wasn't a guy that, felt pressure and just ran out. I mean, he was making strikes out there. And, granted, he had horrible offensive line play. And also, the offensive line really made us not have any kind of a run game. The run game really never developed. There was only a play or two that was actually impressive when it comes to the actual run game. But it's not a good situation right now with the offensive line. Now, it would be cool to see Gardner Minshew behind a starting offensive line, but it's not going to happen unless something terrible happens to Nick Foles. But I mean, it was really cool seeing him in there. I mean, Gardner Minshew was reading the field really well, and I was pretty impressed, especially after last week where I thought he was just awful. But you also look at a guy like Alex Magoo. Alex Magoo had a pretty exciting game. Even though his numbers weren't very good, he was 2 for 9 with a 22% completion percentage. Some of his balls, his best thing was his escapability. I mean, the guy was escaping a pocket, escaping pressure, and he was making some things happen with his feet. Obviously, he had that one touchdown run. He had one first down run in a 3rd and 15 that he turned into positive yards. And Alex Magoo was really impressive. Now, there were a couple of his balls. A lot of his incompletions came with catchable balls. Now, there were 2 balls bad at the line of scrimmage. There was 1 ball that was uncatchable, but a lot of them were in good spots. So really, when the 4th preseason game comes, I would almost like to see, him play for a whole half. Maybe Gardner Minshew the first half, Alex Magoo the second half, because, I think there really is something we could work with him. And he also has a tattoo sleeve. And anybody I see with a tattoo sleeve, I automatically see as a threat. Now, another bright spot with this offense is Trey McBride. Trey McBride turned in a second consecutive good game. This game, he had 4 receptions for 47 yards, which makes his preseason total 7 receptions for 89 yards. So he's been highly productive. Now, he's not some like undrafted guy. He has been around the league. This is his third team in, I believe, 4 years, as he also played with the Chicago Bears. He was with the Tennessee Titans, and I think he was even with the New York Jets a little bit. I could be wrong there, but, he has been around a little bit, so he's not like an Allen Hurns or like a Keelan Cole story. But, he has a real chance to make this roster, because when you look at things, some of the roster locks on this team are guys like Dede Westbrook, DJ Chark, Chris Conley. All those guys are locked to make the roster. And Marquise Lee is. However, Marquise Lee is most likely going to begin the season on a PUP, which is going to deactivate him for the first 6 weeks of the season. So while I was editing this video, I received word from Twitter that Marquise Lee has been activated and lifted off of the PUP, so he will not begin the season on the shelf. So please disregard what I'm about to say. However, with that, the Jaguars will be able to open up an extra roster spot. So I would think a guy like Keelan Cole is going to make the roster. But, that puts us at 4 receivers. And most teams either have 5 or 6. So when you look at it, Terrell Pryor, a lot of people think will make the roster. But Terrell Pryor doesn't give you any special teams play. He's pretty much strictly a wide receiver. And generally, if you're the 5th or 6th wide receiver on a team, you're going to have to contribute to special teams. This is something that Trey McBride can do, and he could very well make this roster. So I'll be interested to see how Trey McBride does going forward. But with that, we'll go ahead and move on. We'll talk about the defense a little bit. Now, once again, I was looking at a lot of really the defensive line this game because we have a lot of players going to make an impact. It's interesting with Josh Allen. Like, Josh Allen was in a game and he was looking like a linebacker. I mean, he was standing up a lot, which is going to be really fascinating to see next week because Yannick Ngakoue, he's going to be a backup to Yannick Ngakoue. But Yannick Ngakoue he never really stood up much. He was never really in a 2-point stance. So when Josh Allen is in there, are they going to make him stand up? And then all of a sudden, Yannick Ngakoue, is he going to be in a 3-point stance? I mean, I'll be really interested to see. And, is Josh Allen going to potentially be a better run stopper? Because, man, this guy's big. This guy can make plays happen. And, he was also dropping back in coverage a good bit. And when you're dropping back in coverage, a defensive lineman can play more snaps because, the most tiring thing in football is when you're in the 3-point stance and you're bull rushing, really just using your speed and just trying to power through guys. That's why so many defensive linemen play every game and they try to get guys fresh. But when you're dropping back in coverage, that's one reason why defensive backs play every play. That's why linebackers play every play because, when you're on your heels, it's a lot less tiresome for your body. So I'm fascinated to see how Josh Allen does. And, I hate to say it, but he could be a reason why Yannick Ngakoue, this, may be his last year on the team because, maybe with Josh Allen, they might be changing the identity of their defense where they're, playing more of a 3-4 with an outside linebacker hybrid, like Josh Allen. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I don't want, people throwing at me saying, don't compare Josh Allen to Yannick Ngakoue. I'm not, but Yannick Ngakoue is relevant to the conversation, so I kind of have to touch on that. Now, next thing I'm going to say is I want to talk about Taven Bryan. Now, Taven Bryan, unfortunately, I feel like I've become a Taven Bryan apologist, especially on Twitter, because I see all these people talking crazy on Twitter, saying, oh, we need to cut this guy. This guy's an automatic bust, whatever. Look, has he been impressive? He hasn't been super impressive. I mean, he hasn't. And he's a first-round pick, a late first-round pick at that. Is he going to be an Aaron Donald? No. Is he going to be a Jared McCoy? No. Worst case scenario, I think this guy may turn into like a Tyson Alualu where at the very least he's a rotational defensive lineman and, you can use rotational defensive linemen. Now, with this game, he played a lot of snaps, so, he didn't always have a full motor. He's going to be a guy that I think is mostly going to come in on third down situations and passing situations where you have him rested and stuff like that and he can come in and play a little bit. But I'll give you some of the things that I do like about Taven Bryan. I like his burst off the line of scrimmage. He gets off the ball extremely quickly. He's got a pretty powerful bull rush, when he's fully, rested. And he also can disrupt the quarterback a little bit. Especially against the Ravens, he had some good quarterback disruptions. Now, some things that he has to work on. He has to work on getting off blocks. Sometimes the offensive lineman will kind of hold him up and he doesn't know where to put him. So I would like to see him do that more. Split double teams a little bit more because he does get double teamed pretty often. A couple plays he actually was able to split the double teams, get right in between them, and kind of disrupt the run play of the game just because he's in the backfield and making a running back run in different directions. So and I want to see him finish plays. I mean, he's not the greatest finisher just yet, but there is something to work with. I'm not, and if you're on the lines of, hey, we need to cut this guy, get him off the team, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So you're just going to have to wait and see. And really, let's start evaluating him at the end of year 2, because then, we'll really get a full standpoint of where he is. So, next up, one guy that's been flashing a lot is Dayton Jones. Really, Dayton Jones and Juwan Smoot are actually battling for the backup defensive end spot, to Calais Campbell. And really, Dayton Jones has been the most flashy defensive lineman on the team, even more so than Josh Allen. I mean, this guy's been getting a lot of quarterback disruptions. He's actually a former first-round pick of the Green Bay Packers, so he has been around a little bit, but he's been getting all kinds of quarterback pressures. He actually concussed Cody Kessler this game. So, Dayton Jones, I would think, has a foot in to be able to be on this roster. So, we'll continue to see with Dayton Jones. He put in a second good week. With the cornerbacks, Quentin Meeks had a good game. Trey Herndon had a good game. Trey Hayes had a good game. The CJ Revis actually played down a little bit this week after having a good game against the Ravens. So, really, I think Quentin Meeks definitely makes the roster. I think Trey Herndon definitely makes the roster. And, I really like our cornerback depth. I mean, I really like our cornerback depth and our defensive line depth. Now, linebacker is very thin, very shaky, and I also think safety could be a little bit sketchy, but, I do like the cornerback depth for the team. And, with that, that's kind of a lot of the, evaluations for the different players. Now, one thing I do want to note on is that the Eagles had 2 pass interference challenges. And obviously, the pass interference challenge is a new thing brought to the NFL this year after the NFC Championship game that last year when the Saints just got completely robbed, and you're able to challenge pass interference calls now. Now, I don't necessarily mind this, but it's going to slow the game a lot. And when I look back at the AAF, I know there was a lot of people that hated on the AAF just for the quality of play and whatnot, but one thing that the AAF did was they did their best when it comes to speeding up the game. And one thing that they were great at was challenges. They would look at a play and they actually would bring the camera and mic up the dude reviewing, and they would kind of walk through it. And, they would look at it, once, twice, maybe 3 times, and they'd call it. But in the NFL, the challenge procedure is just way too elongated. I don't know what they're waiting on for so long. It seems like they just take forever, and that's going to slow down games. And I have a feeling this pass interference thing is going to drive me nuts. I mean, maybe it might save us a game. This game, it wasn't necessarily good for us as they kept challenging. But I don't know. It's just it's going to take some getting used to. So with this game, man, obviously, like I said, a lot of stars in play, so it's more about evaluation. The Jaguars against Miami next week, they are going to be playing starters. Now, for how long, I don't know. But it's going to be actually exciting to see Nick Foles and some of these guys, Leonard Fournette, some guys that are actually going to make real impacts on a team instead of seeing all of our backup offensive linemen in there. It's been a horrible product so far. This preseason has been a terrible product. And, like I said, there's going to have to be some changes to come in the future. But thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel. And this is UCF Jaguar with GenJag.com, and I'll see you guys in my next video.